Hello. This is the first of one of my Valentine Goose talks when I'm driving. I left, I don't know, about an hour ago. I finally hit some smooth road. And I was thinking this morning about superstitions and the role superstitions play in our lives. And I have, I consider myself a rational person, and I know superstitions are irrational and they're illogical, and they don't perform, they're not real, but I still go through superstitions. I still believe in some things, and not believe, but they bring me comfort. I think that's the proper way to think of it, is they bring me comfort. So I have some superstitions that are always based on when I go on trips, and 90% of the time I leave on trips at night after work, but I'm working nights now, so I left in the morning. But when you leave at night, I always see Orion in the sky, and Orion is like the hunter. He's the guardian of the people that are traveling, and always when I leave at night, I look up and I'll see Orion, or I'll know where Orion is. Sometimes it's cloudy, but I'll look up and I'll be like, Orion, watch over me. And it's kind of a prayer to the gods, and it's just, like I said, it's not logical, but it brought me comfort. And leaving in the morning, it actually felt funny that I wasn't able to look up and see Orion, but that's kind of what this trip is for, is to shake things up and to break the norm. But there was other things too. I had this little ritual, like when I top my tank off with gas, because you do that before a long trip, I would always get something to drink and an Almond Joy bar. And I went to a little Murphy station, and they didn't have Almond Joys. And I'm like, what is the deal? So I couldn't say hello to Orion. I couldn't get an Almond Joy bar. And then the third thing is, and this goes all the way back when I was a little kid. My dad was a truck driver, and every summer he would, I'd go on trips with him, and I saw a lot of America, and he drove mostly like from Michigan to the East Coast, and so I saw a lot of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and we had some adventures along that way. One of the things I can remember is, he was an independent, so this is back in the 70s, and when you're an independent, like, you'd get to a place like New York City and you'd park in a truck yard, and you'd tell the dispatcher, I'm from Michigan, I need to go back to Michigan, and the dispatcher would take calls from different factories and stuff, and like, oh, hey, we got a load going back to Michigan, here's where you need to pick it up, and here's where it needs to go. And sometimes that didn't work out. Like, you might wait 2 or 3 days before you got a load back. So we're sitting in this truck yard, and it's like you can picture a truck yard for the 70s. There were hookers. There were literally guys that would like open up their coats and like, you want to buy a watch, and they'd have watches inside. Just dirty, nasty stuff. And I'm just this little kid. But one thing I remember sitting in this truck yard for days is I was looking at the World Trade Center being built, and it was, the ground floors of the World Trade Center were rented out before it was finished. So there's all these lights in the ground floors, lower floors, and then like in the middle it's girders, and then on top it's just stuff sticking up and cranes. And I just remember sitting, watching that. And my dad loved the World Trade Center. He always took pictures of it. I'm pretty sure if we could gather all those pictures together, we'd have like a time lapse of the thing being built. My dad was there the day they filmed the ground scene from King Kong, when King Kong jumps from one tower to the other and then he falls. At the end, there's a scene where he's laying on the ground, there's a big crowd around him. And my dad was there the day after they shot that, because that was a night scene. And he watched them take this giant King Kong apart and load it onto flatbed trucks and haul it out. And, so that would be kind of neat to watch. But anyway, getting back to the truck, when I was a little kid, I wanted to stay awake as long as my dad stayed awake. And these are the days, when logbooks didn't really mean much. He would drive for 20 hours straight, and I would try to stay awake with him. And at night, he had a CB radio, and the CB radio had a rectangular squelch gauge, and it glowed just like a dim yellow, and then there were like the other gauges that would light up with little dots and circles. And if I looked out the passenger window, I would see this reflection of the CB radio, and it looked like a face with hair flowing out behind it. It's just the way the window distorted it. And for years, I remember this. He was independent, so he owned his truck, but he had different trucks over the years. But he always mounted the CB radio, up to the ceiling. And so I dubbed this the road witch. I don't think I've ever told anybody this before, but I could sit there and see this road witch, and it looked like a face with hair flowing out behind it, floating, because it's the reflection in the window, so it looked like it was floating alongside the road, going wherever the truck did. And if I tilted my head and moved my head just right, I could make this reflection dodge trees and go over signs. So, for years growing up, I just knew, well, there's the road witch. And as long as I saw the road witch, I felt comfortable. So, driving at night, and it doesn't matter what I'm driving, I'll look over at the passenger window and I'll see reflections of, the gauges or whatever in the window. And just seeing those reflections, I'm like, okay, I know the road witch is out there, and it made me feel comfortable. But again, I left during the day, didn't get my almond bar, didn't get to see Orion, and I can't see the road witch. So it's like, I just feel like no one's watching over me. There's nothing going right. But it is going right. Logically, I just had a tune-up. I just did the brakes. Everything's good on the car. Great weather. I got a long way to go. I probably got 12 to 14 hours driving ahead of me. I'm taking some side roads because I want to see a few things. But I don't have that comfort of that superstition. And I feel it. And I don't know. It's just weird. And I know tonight when it gets dark and I'm going to see the road witch, I'm going to see Orion, hopefully, because it's looking pretty dark right now. Lots of clouds rolling in. But then I'll start to feel that comfort of, yes, I'm on the road, and yes, there's something watching over me. And, I'm not a religious person, but I imagine this is what a religious person feels. This is probably the basis, the root of religions. I could talk about the road witch today, and 20 years from now, the road witch could be a religion. And that's how things spread. But it's just very uncomforting not to have those comforts. That's probably the most illogical sentence ever. But I'm headed out. I'm going to take side roads through Iowa. Going along with Superstitions, I yearn for adventure. And last summer, one of the things I did just to pass the time, because it's Iowa, there's nothing here, as I researched what are the most haunted spaces in Iowa. And I went to a lot of different websites, and when you narrow it down to the state, there's like 7 or 8 locations that say they all agreed on, and then there was a couple of strange ones. But I spent the whole summer visiting these locations, and one thing these websites would talk about is the Black Angel. Now, Iowa has this big cemetery out by Iowa City, and it's got this really weird Black Angel statue that's been there since like the 20s or whatever. Just has a lot of superstition and stuff built up around it. And when I went there, it was very obvious that you could see people had actually left tokens and presents and stuff at its feet. And there was another Black Angel. So some of these sites I'd be confused. I'm reading these Black Angel stories, and they're not the same. They're not describing the same thing. And the other Black Angel is on the other coast, on the west coast of Iowa. So I never made it that far because that's like a 4 or 5 hour drive, and all the other places were pretty, probably within 2 or 3 hours of Mason City. So I never made this drive. So I'm taking these back roads. I could have taken the highway, but I knew I'd be tired from work and stuff. So I'm gonna stop and then see the other Black Angel, and that'll like complete my list. I've seen what all these websites kind of agree on are the most haunted places in Iowa, and that kind of goes along with why are these places like this? It's because of the superstitions behind it. If you kiss the Black Angel's foot, you'll die within a day, and obviously that's not true because I'm still here. Yes, I kissed the Black Angel's foot, but I just feel like everything didn't go right. So I'm going to see if I visit the Black Angel, if that'll go right, and then continue on my way. Like I said, I got about 13 more hours to do, and my plan was every time I get tired, I was going to do a little video and talk about something. So this is my first video. I don't know when I'll upload it, but it's going to go to the Valentine Goose Project because this is the Valentine Goose trip. And I got a lot more to talk about, and a lot more to touch on. But this was just my thoughts on superstitions. And that's what I'm thinking about. Is like, oh, here's another superstition I have. I was going to bring this up earlier, but this goes way, way back. And I used to carry around silver coins. Silver coin, real silver coins from the 20s. They're really heavy, and there's a reason they make bells out of silver. That it just has this ring to it. So here's my 2 silver coins. I never leave home without it. Rarely leave home without it. When I do leave home without them, I feel funny. Just like on this trip. It's like you're missing a piece of yourself. But I've been carrying these. I bought these in Denver because they're usually about $40 each. This is a Morgan silver dollar and a Lady Liberty silver dollar, 1 year apart, like the end of one series and the beginning of the other. But I've been carrying these probably for 6 years, and I've even had some people like call me out on it, like, "Hey, you got your silver coins?" I'd pull them out, and they'd be like, "Damn!" But yeah, I love the way they jingle. I've just always carried it, but there's a superstition involved here. It's not just the fact that I'm carrying them, but how do I explain this? There's, the mythology that when you die, you have to cross the river Styx. And if I die and I got my silver, I can pay the ferryman and get a better ride or whatever. But I carry silver in case I die. I can pay the ferryman. And when I don't have my silver on me, and it happens, sometimes I walk out and I leave and I forget to grab them. I feel funny. I feel like, God, I can't die without my silver. I better not. And I'm more careful. I'll watch the traffic better. I'm careful at work. And it's like, yeah, I can't die without my silver. So I'm careful till I get home. But yeah, it's just another superstition. And at least with everything I didn't get to do on this trip, at least I remembered my silver coins. And so there is a little comfort there. And hopefully the Black Witch will, at least I'll get some good pictures or whatever. And then I'll head on across the grasslands in Nebraska. But yeah, those are my thoughts on superstition. It's just, I'm a logical man, but I feel empty without these. And I'm sure everybody has something like that. And even people like Michael Jordan and, especially sports people all have superstitions. But they're illogical and you don't really believe in them, but they comfort you. And that's my takeaway is superstitions comfort you. And so I'm going to leave you with that, and I'll upload this when I get a chance. And it'll be my second video for the Valentine Goose Project. I'm going to talk more about my book and stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and you guys take care and just think about your superstitions.